The air in the House Judiciary Committee chamber felt charged, as if every breath carried the weight of what was about to happen. Senator Tim Scott sat across from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, leaning into the microphone with a jaw set like stone. What had been billed as a straightforward hearing on civil rights enforcement was moments away from becoming one of the most unforgettable political clashes of the year. Congresswoman Crockett. Scott began, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade. "You've been spreading falsehoods about Republican voting records, and I'm here to set the record straight." The confidence radiating from him was unmistakable. He believed he had an ironclad case. Crockett, however, answered only with a calm, knowing smile, the kind that hinted he was already in more trouble than he realized. Over the next half hour, Scott's argument would unravel, leaving him struggling for words and propelling Crockett into the center of a viral political storm. This was not going to be a polite disagreement. This was about to become a case study in dismantling an opponent with pure, verifiable evidence. The committee room was silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. Scott thought he was in control. Crockett knew better. She had come armed with something he didn't expect. At 58, Tim Scott had built his brand as the most prominent black Republican in the U.S. Senate, a man whose personal story of rising from poverty in North Charleston, South Carolina, to political power embodied his party's vision of conservative solutions to racial inequality. His resume included stints as a Fox News favorite and a reliable GOP voice in debates over race, policing, and opportunity. But cracks were forming. Recent polls showed his support slipping among black voters, and Democrats were landing blow after blow over Republican opposition to voting rights measures. Scott needed a defining moment to reassert his relevance and to quiet critics in his own party who questioned whether he could be aggressive enough against Democrats. Crockett, 43, was not the adversary he had hoped for. A former public defender and civil rights lawyer from Dallas, Texas, she'd spent just 2 years in Congress, but had already gained a reputation for fearless questioning and direct, plain-spoken challenges to Republican talking points. Growing up in St. Louis, she'd seen inequality up close and made a career defending those who couldn't defend themselves. She wasn't a politician who played safe. Her style connected with younger voters and spread quickly online. For weeks, Crockett and her team had been quietly preparing for just such a confrontation. They had compiled detailed records of Republican votes, speeches, and statements with the meticulousness of a trial lawyer building a case. She didn't just bring talking points, she brought receipts. The stakes were huge, midterm elections were looming, and control of Congress was on the line. Every sound bite mattered. Scott hoped this hearing would put Crockett on the defensive. She saw it as a chance to pull the curtain back on what she viewed as Republican double standards. When the gavel dropped and Scott was recognized, he wasted no time. Madam Chair. He began with gravity. For months, Congresswoman Crockett has misled the public about Republican voting records on civil rights. She has painted us as opponents of black communities, and as the only black Republican in the Senate, I find these claims offensive. He turned directly toward her. You claimed Republicans voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to suppress black votes. That's a lie. Crockett's smile deepened, but she didn't interrupt. Scott pressed on. You also said Republicans opposed funding for civil rights enforcement at the Justice Department. Another lie. You're spreading misinformation for political gain. Republican members nodded approvingly. Democrats shifted uneasily. When Crockett finally spoke, her voice was even and deliberate. Senator Scott, I never said Republicans don't care about civil rights. What I said, and will keep saying, is that Republican voting records do not match their rhetoric. Scott pounced. That's exactly the misleading narrative I'm talking about. Are you suggesting I ignore the actual votes when I evaluate your record? She asked, her tone sharpening into that of a courtroom cross-examination. I'm suggesting you tell the truth instead of cherry-picking data. Scott shot back. Then Crockett asked quietly, did you vote for the John Lewis Act, yes or no? Scott hesitated. It was flawed legislation, yes or no? I voted against it. Then I didn't lie, she said smoothly. I told the American people exactly how you voted. The momentum shifted. Crockett began pulling documents from a folder, each one a weapon. She read from a transcript of his Fox News interview, a press release from his own office, and finally, internal emails obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. The emails revealed coordination between Scott's staff and conservative groups to craft talking points against voting rights legislation, including one message where his chief of staff described him as willing to be the lead black voice, opposing the John Lewis Act, provided they could frame it as bad for black voters. The room erupted. Scott tried to protest, claiming context was missing, but Crockett cut him off sharply. Every accusation you've made against me is actually a confession of what you've been doing. Then she produced one last memo, dated just a week earlier, outlining a Republican strategy to use a black spokesperson to counter Democratic civil rights messaging. "You didn't come here because you were offended by lies, Senator," she said, her voice steady and unshaken. "You came here to weaponize your identity while attacking me for telling the truth. I'm not intimidated by you. I have the receipts." By the time the chair called for a recess, the damage was irreversible. Within minutes, clips were trending online under #Crockett receipts, amplified by both political camps. Even conservative commentators admitted Scott had been out-prepared. Cable networks replayed the exchange on loop. CNN called it a masterclass in preparation. MSNBC broke down each document in detail. Even Fox News struggled to defend Scott, with one panelist conceding he accused her of lying, and she proved she wasn't. Over the following days, Crockett's team released the full set of documents online, keeping the story alive. Her calm focus on facts, contrasted with Scott's defensiveness, only deepened the public impression that she'd decisively won. The political fallout for Scott was severe, plummeting approval ratings among black voters, doubts from Republican donors, and a newly minted reputation for being vulnerable to well-prepared opponents. For Crockett, the moment vaulted her into the national spotlight, her Crockett method of bringing hard evidence to political fights becoming a model for other Democrats. In the end, the confrontation became a cautionary tale. In an era of instant fact-checking and viral video, accusations without evidence are not just risky, they can be career-ending. Crockett's victory was not only about winning a political fight. It was about proving that in the hands of someone prepared, the truth is the most powerful weapon in the room.